So as Lewis talked about, we weren't sure exactly what type of crowd we would be talking to. So when I talk about facilitation, I'm going to be talking about a group, area, region all at the same time, because these basics will apply to any one of those atmospheres. One of the hardest things that a lot of us here in Narcotics Anonymous struggle with is sticking to the agenda. Now, a facilitator, it's kind of our job to keep the conversation moving as we move. So if you start seeing participants go down a rabbit hole, or even the facilitator go down a rabbit hole, just kind of reel it back in. We try to do that in the most loving way that we can without calling people out on it. Like one of the better qualities of a facilitator is someone that's actually like engaging, that's easy to talk to. So if you have a strong personality as a facilitator, often newer members won't want to raise their hand and be part of this conversation because they're afraid to. So having a facilitator be more open and encouraging more conversations is very, very important. It gets people involved. These decisions that we make now are a true group conscience, not the conscience of a few. And again, to have an opinion, we all do. But as a facilitator, I try not to force my opinion. I can be part of a conversation, but I try not to like make it very clear, like this is what I want. Let the group decide what they want. And these are hard things. Like this all goes back to my personal recovery. Like if I'm working with my sponsor in the steps, I'm able to practice those principles. Next slide, Lewis.
What's going on? Boom. Hang on.
And this is called going with the flow.
This is called going with the flow. Is that
Facilitation Brainstorming? Yeah.
Yeah.
As someone had pointed out in the slide that Dennis, or the video that Dennis was sharing, Dennis was speaking and chairing the NAZF and doing his own notes. He's very talented like that. Not all of us are. Like I have a hard time doing two things at once. I don't have a problem being a facilitator, but it makes my job a lot easier if I have a scribe, someone taking the notes. A recording secretary of some type makes the job a little bit easier. Kind of takes the load off of one person. There are people, like I said, I'm going to use Dennis again as an example. Like he's able to do that and he does it very well. I don't have that skill set. I can do one of those things. I can't walk and chew gum. I'm limited, guys. When we go around the room, we want to try to get as many people involved in this conversation as possible. Whatever the idea or the proposal is, the more people that are able to participate in that, the more true of group conscience we're able to gather. So it's important to get everyone involved with that. And listening carefully to the actual ideas being shared, the conversation that's had is probably one of my favorite parts of being a facilitator. We're going to use the NAZF motion for the Fellowship Development Ad Hoc Committee. When I was presenting this with my region, I would present that and I would listen to the region's concerns. And I would try to find, is there a common thread in what they're talking about? If there is, accent that. Like, this is what I'm hearing, is this true? That may change how this proposal takes shape as we go on, but that's me listening to the conversations as they're happening. That's one of the parts of being an effective facilitator that we have to like learn how to do, and it gets easier with time. So, next one. Before we take a vote, it's always helpful to go back through and restate the proposal, what we have at that moment, right? To make it more clear to everyone that's listening. Ask after we take a vote, is we okay with moving on with this? Is this a final decision? Yes, no, whatever. Like, it's super important that we give everyone the opportunity to participate in this. Every single voice should have the opportunity to be heard, including the shy, quiet ones. We want to get them involved too. This is not the fellowship of just a few people. It's a fellowship of all of us. So it's important to let all of us make these decisions. And it really does feel more like a God-given conscience than, a strong-willed conscience when we do this. Again, watching the time, like it's 11:18, we have till 11:30. I'm doing that right now. Next one. This is a categorizing that we were talking about, listening to the conversation as we go, picking out any threads that seem familiar. Is this what I'm hearing? Is this what we want? Breaking them up and putting them in little different groups. Now the dot voting is more like the flip charts that we see, the big notepads that we write things on. When we use dot voting, it's to go up there and put a dot under the idea that you think is the highest priority. This helps prioritize our list. It's another way to gain support, consensus, right? So when we have multiple things on an agenda, we can use the dot voting, we can use raising your hand, we can use a poll on Zoom. These things help us prioritize what we're talking about as we go on. And it makes it, the dot voting is a good visual, so you'll actually see what rises to the top, whoever has the strongest support. Agreeing the steps to implement highest priority. Again, that's something we can do. We can do planning basics on NA.org. There's I think it's seven or 8 steps. It breaks down how to prioritize these type of ideas, grouping them in separate categories. You can use a tool like that. You can just use a simple conversation too. It doesn't have to be anything quote unquote official or structured. It can just be a conversation. It depends on the service body that you're working with. My home group will have a conversation. My area, maybe a conversation and some dot voting. In that region, it's almost always some type of like a dot voting thing. So we see the visual. So different service bodies and different groups are going to ask for different things, and knowing in advance how you're going to prioritize these things is very important. And that's a conversation that you have before you start talking about proposals. Okay, Louis? The virtual meeting. So as Dennis said, we've been doing this at the NEZF for a little while. I've been working with Shane a lot, and we've had a lot of these type of virtual Zoom meetings and service meetings, we'll say. So it gets easier and more comfortable with you the more of these things that you do. There's not a huge difference between doing this in Zoom and in person, in my opinion. When I go to my RSC and I sit here on Zoom, I feel the same way. I feel like I have the same opportunity to participate. I feel like the same consensus-based decision-making is still taking place. It just looks a little different. Instead of sitting side by side with people, I'm sitting and looking at a screen with other people. It's the same concept and it's the same spirit that goes involved with all of this. Just like in person, we want to keep control of this queue. So everyone talking over each other is not a good thing. We wouldn't allow it at the RSC meeting I go to. Same thing with Zoom. That's why we use like muting and raising your hand to help keep the flow and then more natural order and some organization, really. We're going to follow the same agenda start to finish. And it's very helpful if you post the agenda in advance so people know what they're getting into before they show up. And what you're seeing here is a screen sharing. This helps with giving reports. Like my RSC meets next week, and my plan is to show my report and walk through it as I go through. So everyone's reading and looking at the exact same thing that I'm doing, just like you're seeing right here. And thankfully, we're not going to experience Zoom bombing right now. We have this on lockdown. Zoom bombing can be dealt with, again, group, area, region, dealt with multiple co-hosts in your settings. And you're not going to have an issue there. We're not going to go too much into the settings aspect of Zoom bombing. Shane has a Google Drive that has all of that information already posted. I'm going to do one shared screen to give you a cheat sheet, to give an idea. So if you go to NA.org, you can look at the service system project, and in there there's a whole lot of information. So what some of us did with members of the NAS staff is we made a cheat sheet, 5 steps on CBDM. Anything in red is more of the thought that you're going to do, and the stuff in black is the actual process that we go through to make these decisions. Now, I found that these are useful in a GSF. We had one in my local area start GSF. They use these. Every member that attended would have the same sheet, including the facilitator. You can use them at areas, groups, regions, whatever. And the bottom of it right here, when we move away from motions and Robert's Rules of Order, we allow a more natural guide in decision making. That's exactly been my experience, as Louis talked about. When we're able to craft the proposals through the conversations as they happen, it feels more natural and it feels more inclusive. I just wanted to share that one piece, and I'm done.